So I'm reading a book. You interrupted with a joke.
Setup. Well, because the setup was so long, I would have fallen asleep if I didn't get to talk.
And what's funny is the book is called Brief Solutions Therapy.
Brief Solutions.
Yeah,
That's right.
and it's by the founder of the school, and it's based on
Your description of the book is longer than the book itself.
Welcome to the Office Hours Podcast. This is TK Coleman and Isaac Morehouse. We're like the Geek Squad for your professional development. Got a job you're trying to get, a work-related issue you're trying to resolve, a project you're trying to complete, an obstacle that's holding you up? Well, you're in the right place. You bring the problem, we bring the nuts and bolts. This is where you get philosophical insight and actionable advice on how to take charge of your life and career.
Hello, Tekoa.
What you been reading?
What have I been reading?
Yeah.
So right now I am listening to on Audible Cryptonomicon by Neil Stephenson. It's like one of his most famous sort of sci-fi, I guess. It's not sci-fi so far, but I'm like 6 hours in and I have like 36 hours of audio left. It's a really long book.
That's a long book.
So I'm listening to that. I just finished up reading The Handicap Principle a little while ago. I'm reading a book called The Rare Find by Jeff or George. I think it's George Anders, which is about how to identify rare talent, excellent top-level talent. Really interesting book.
Let me stop you right here in the middle because you just mentioned the handicap principle. I just listened yesterday to the Daniel Krawitz video.
Kraswitz. Something like that. Yeah.
However you say it. Yeah, the Daniel Kraswitz video on the handicap principle. And he talked about it in the context of cryptocurrency and so forth. But give a recap on that and why you've been intrigued by this idea. What is the handicap principle? Why does it matter?
I've been fascinated by for a long time just signaling theory in general. And once you start to apply the economic way of thinking to life, you start to understand that a lot of behaviors that seem irrational are rational. And one of the reasons they are often comes down to signaling. And that's the whole thing we talk about with degrees in the world of careers and education. But it applies everywhere, right? There are signals everywhere. And pretty soon, once you see the world that way, you can't unsee it. And you just like start to interpret everything as signaling.
Would you say we're all signaling at all times?
Everything signals. It's all layers of signals, which in some sense is true, right? You don't want it to devolve to the point of meaninglessness. But so the handicap principle, it's essentially these like evolutionary biologists who are looking at features in nature, features in the animal kingdom that seem to serve no functional utilitarian purpose on first observation, like big, giant, clumsy antlers on a deer that are not used for anything practical, or a bird with a tail that's so long they can barely get off the ground and fly, or even behaviors like when a predator is approaching, some types of prey will jump up out of the brush to make themselves more visible to the predator before they run off. Or a seagull will find food, call out to all the other seagulls, and then when they all arrive, he'll fight them off the whole time. And you're like, well, why would he call them over if he's going to fight them off? So the handicap principle is all about these various signals in nature that are essentially signals of fitness for mates. And so the idea is it's like a guy walking into a club with a stack of hundreds and lighting them on fire. It's a resource intense, it's a way of wasting resources as a display of how powerful you are or how much you can afford to waste. So in a scarce resource environment, a deer that can afford to consume enough resources to grow massive antlers that make them heavier, slower, and can still survive and thrive must be a powerful deer. An animal that can tip its hand to the predator and increase the odds of being caught and still be confident in getting away, right? That's like Rasheed Wallace guaranteeing a victory, right? You're
right,
raising the pressure on yourself, but if you still come through. And so it's this signal that, hey, this is how fit I am. I'm capable of having this really inefficient resource-consuming behavior. And it goes behind this whole idea, which Daniel talks about in the cryptosphere, but we talk about with being your own credential of proof of work. You have to make a signal that's hard to fake. You have to make a signal that's costly to create. And so if you can just buy a degree from a degree mill really easily, it loses its value as a signal because it doesn't really mean that much. It's not that hard to get it, right?
Yeah. Especially as we make it easier for more and more people to do that.
If you create something that's hard to fake and that you could not have done if you did not put some scarce resources into, that's a powerful signal that means more, right? So like if you have a picture of you on Instagram on a boat, that's a signal that, oh, you must be wealthy, you're on a boat. But it's kind of easy to fake, right? You could have just jumped on a boat and took a picture real quick. If you invite somebody to go out on your boat with you, that's a hard thing to fake. It signals a kind of wealth that is a higher degree of probability of being correct. So it's just about that applying in nature and what it means for predator-prey relationships, all these different things. Very, very fascinating.
You know, I'm fascinated by the aspect of how taking on a real limitation, one that makes your life more difficult, how that can signal something very important to other people that brings a lot of value to your life. So you use the antlers as an example. Here's one that comes up a lot, and it really frustrates me when people ask this all the time.
Your hair? You're growing it really long. It's a lot of work to maintain. But you just want to know, time. I got the resources to make this work.
Right.
Baby.
I want people to know that I got the ability to
My
do it.
coiffeur.
I was bald for so long. People were like, "Can he do it?"
They didn't think you could do it.
They didn't think I could do it.
And they thought like growing hair would suck the life force out of the rest of your body. But you've got enough energy to sustain it, you know?
And I'm signaling to the world that every time you think I can't do something, I've got another bag of tricks up my sleeve. Okay, so this comes up a lot in discussions on college where people say, yeah, I get that you could sort of do this thing outside of college, like make friends, but it's so much easier if you're on a campus. And that always bothers me because people assume that the easier path to X is the superior path to X. So that if it can be shown, for instance, that it's easier to make friends if you're living on a campus, that is the superior path to cultivating a network or making friendships. But sometimes the harder path is not only better for your character and helping you develop a sense of agency, but it also signals very important things to the people that are making hiring decisions. It says, you can put me in any context, and I will be proactive enough to get out there and connect with people and create my own context for conversation, and I don't need the easy way to do it. You know, and I think that's so important when we're advising young people or having discussions about what people should do to be successful. You can't just assume that because something is easier, that it's better. Sometimes the harder path is more valuable to others.
Well, so the less costly the signal, the less valuable it is. But cost can come in a number of ways, right? So this is why, and this actually gets to one of the questions we were asked that we're going to get to here, but I'll preempt it, about what happens to college and alternatives to college if college becomes free. Like free as in everyone's forced to pay for it through taxes and you're not paying tuition. So that would mean the cost of getting the degree, the cost of obtaining that signal would plummet dramatically, which means the value of that signal would also plummet dramatically. Now, even today, you could say, oh, well, if it's the cost that equals the value, a degree must be really valuable because it's really expensive. Cost is not just monetary cost. So when this is why there's this huge advantage to people who, while the dominant cultural narrative is still worshipful of college, those who opt out, they get an added benefit. Some point down the road, it will be so common that you won't get any added benefit. You get like some free added benefit by opting out. Why? Because opting out is actually the more costly thing in terms of reputation and courage. So you're signaling, I opted out of college in order to build this thing or do this thing that I'm applying to you. And it's like, okay, not only did you show me what you built and what you did, but you opted out of college to somebody who understands things correctly, which is more and more hires. It's like, that's a pretty costly thing to do. I know your parents gave you crap for it. I know society is not going to give you easy wins. I know it took courage. I know it took independent thinking. That's actually a costly signal now, even though the dollar cost of a degree is much higher. So anyway, but anytime you lower the cost of obtaining a signal, then the value declines as well, just because it's easier to fake and they proliferate everywhere.
And that's the trouble with
it's like tattoos, by the way. It used to be like, if you had a tattoo, it like signaled something about toughness or uniqueness.
Right.
But everybody has them now. They're everywhere. So the signaling value is really muddy. It's hard to know what a tattoo means anymore.
You know what's funny is in that handicap principle video, one of the things that Daniel says near the end is that profit is the reward for understanding reality. That you profit because
it's a great line.
Yeah, it's because you see something long before others see it, and you act on what it is you see.
And it's real, right? Because you can see things that turn out not to be real. You can have an incorrect insight,
Right.
Which is why there's risk involved.
Right.
But you see it first and it turns out to be real. Yeah.
Yeah, and that reveals a fundamental problem with taking an approach to life that says, well, let me find out what everyone else is doing and use that as the basis for my decision. Well, you're looking at realities that everyone else can see, and those are the realities which, by the very nature of investing, have the least amount of upside, right? If you want upside, you have to start with the things that few people see, few people do, and you have to try to make the best decisions within that context.
What are some books that you're reading?
Oh man, so I've been really fascinated with therapy as of late. Why are you laughing?
Because you got a look on your face that was like you were quickly shuffling through your mind, thinking, which ones do I admit openly to reading, and which ones do I hide?
Which ones do I admit openly? So I've always had an interest in psychology, but therapy focuses on the application of psychological research towards the end of helping people cope with everyday challenges or lifelong traumas. And there are a ton of different schools of therapy. There's something called brief solutions therapy. There's narrative therapy. There's Gestalt therapy. There's cognitive behavior therapy. And when you get into the different schools of therapy, what their underlying premises are and how they work with clients and the different tools they use, it starts to make you look at the realm of self-help in a different context because it reveals the assumptions, that different people have, in self-help. And it kind of, in many ways, you start to see that most of what passes for self-help is kind of like the watered down or maybe the pragmatically focused non-academic version of what you see in the realm of therapy. And so it's kind of fascinating to compare. Anyway, with that being said, I'm reading a book by the founder of something called Brief Solutions Therapy, which is a school of therapy based on
Hanes underwear?
Brief
solutions.
You put on briefs and it works. It solves all your problems. So this
you never interrupt me with stupid jokes.
I never do that to you.
I'm sorry.
Can
I just take this minute right now to tell you publicly, I apologize, CK, for my disrespect.
No, listen, man. You don't have to be any different. You don't have to be any different.
Good, because I regret nothing.
There's enough room for you to be who you are in my presence, man.
You're like, look, I am signaling to the world that I can still be a decent person in the presence of this jerk. That's a costly signal. You're handicapping yourself by having me co-host the show, just to show.
Your friendship is a huge cost, but I just want the world to know that I can afford it.
Did you tell us what the book is yet?
So I'm reading a book. You interrupted with a joke.
Setup. Well, because the setup was so long, I would have fallen asleep if I didn't get to talk.
And what's funny is the book is called Brief Solutions Therapy.
Brief Solutions.
Yeah,
that's right.
And it's by the founder of the school, and it's based on
Your description of the book is longer than the book.
I'm going to give you a long description of a brief book about brief solutions. And I'm reading that one in conjunction with another by the same author called When Words Were Magic. And Brief Solutions Therapy is it's based on the premise that in order to solve a problem, you don't need to do a whole bunch of long-winded investigation into the nature and complexity of the problem. You need to help the client identify what the solution looks like, and the knowledge of what is needed begins to arise organically out of that process. And the basic idea is that the kind of thinking it takes to generate solutions is very different than the kind of thinking it takes to solve problems.
Okay, let me ask you about that.
To understand problems.
Because that immediately appeals to me so strongly.
Sure.
But I run into a lot of trouble, especially with my family, my wife and my son. If they're struggling with something, it's like that little video you've seen where the woman's got a nail sticking out of her head. I have this pain, these headaches. And her husband's like, oh, well, there's a nail in your head. She's like, would you stop giving me solutions? I just want you to hear me.
Yeah.
My head hurts, but there's a nail. Can I, and sometimes I feel like that where, say Heather's had a rough day and she starts talking about it. Within 2 seconds, I'm immediately like, idea, solution. And I'm like chomping at the bit to be like, well, you know what? Have you tried this? And she doesn't want that. She just wants to vent it. And I've had to learn. There's a great scene in the movie Inside Out where like the sad character, like the happy one just doesn't get it. Like, come on, let's move. And it's like, no, you just have to sit and listen for a minute. And then that character immediately feels better and is motivated to move on. So I like it when I hear it because it appeals to me. But what is your response to if taking that approach of let's not analyze how the problem got here, let's just look at what you can do and start talking about that? Is there something that needs to happen for some personalities anyway to say, can I just be heard in my suffering first, and then we can move to solutions? Like, do you have a hard time getting some people to move to the solutions mindset?
Yeah. So the value of saying you don't need to analyze the problem endlessly is that it stops the person who is facilitating the conversation from taking you deeper and deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole, which is something that seems to happen in some schools of therapy. It's one thing for you to come to me.
So it's more of a limitation on the therapist.
Yeah, exactly.
Then it is trying to force the client to, okay, stop complaining and move to solutions.
Exactly, because there are some therapists who, if you come to them with a problem, they will move the conversation in a direction that's aimed at like understanding your childhood, what happened 5-10 years ago. And this school of thought is saying that process might be less necessary than what's been traditionally supposed.
It makes me think of What About Bob, where he's like, I just get really afraid that something's going to happen. He's like, talk about afraid.
Yeah,
well, blah, blah, blah. Talk about that. He just keeps saying, talk about, and they just keep going further down this analytical rabbit hole,
Yeah. Now, another thing, too, is that solutions-oriented thinking is something that is also a skill that people have to learn. And so if you're talking with a person who is very skillful at the art of complaining and venting, but they're not skillful at the art of thinking about what would make them happy, then spending more time allowing them to process and get it out there might be a part of what you need to do to teach them how to talk about the solutions. So you don't cut them off. You sort of do a little bit of Aikido, right? You work with that energy and you help them, because usually people will, if you allow them to talk long enough about their problems, they will reveal what it is that makes them happy. And then the last thing I would say, and this is the most important part of it all for me and why I'm studying different schools, is I'm pretty non-dogmatic about this stuff. I'm not searching for the one right school of therapy. I'm studying the game of different people who use different tools to help human beings cope with their challenges. And I'm looking to see how I can selfishly create value for me to more effectively deal with my own challenges. And so if I find something in narrative therapy that seems to work for me, I don't pressure myself to be an evangelist of that as a true approach. It's just, hey, this is a tool that worked. I picked it up from that source. Awesome. And then if I read a book on Gestalt therapy, I don't care if that was refuted 60 years ago and nobody uses it. If there's some exercise or technique that makes me feel better or allows me to be more successful in my own life, I'm going to use it from a pragmatic standpoint and be agnostic about the truth of it.
And it's such a freeing mindset that makes life more fun as well. I'm reminded of a tweet I just saw recently where someone was like, oh, I applied for this data scientist or data analytics role. And in the application process, they were like, what's your Myers-Briggs type? I can't believe for a role like this, they would ask someone like me, a data scientist, to do something that's pseudoscience that's been thoroughly debunked by statisticians as having a false correlation to blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And you hear a lot of people hate Myers-Briggs. A lot of people hate the 5 tendencies, whatever. And it's like, chill out, dude. Go to 16personalities.com. You take the quiz, and it's kind of fun. And you can agree or disagree with it, but it's a fun talking point. And if the people you work for, they happen to, for whatever reason, they find knowing your Myers-Briggs type, or maybe even knowing what your opinion is of Myers-Briggs types. Maybe you even just saying, oh, I never find those accurate, is something they find interesting. Why is that so offensive? Like, it's pseudoscience. What does that even mean? Myers-Briggs is either useful to people or it's not. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, man. And this is something that you and I have discussed before about not having too many hills to die on.
Yes.
You don't need to
Paul Graham calls it keeping your identity small.
Ooh, I like that. I like that approach. Yeah, I mean, it allows you to be so much more flexible when you don't feel the need to take a side on everything. I even saw this in the Handicap Principle video where one of the guys says, people get upset at me when I stop investing in something because they say I'm no longer on the team. He says, but there is no team. I don't care about teams. I invest in something because I think it's profitable. And when that belief changes, I'm free to remove my investment without a sense of betrayal. And there are so many people in life who they do things that don't work. And they they fail to take advantage of the opportunity to cease investing their time in those things because why? They feel like they're going to be betraying a philosophy, and that's completely unnecessary. By the way, we've talked about this a lot. One of the things the great athletes do is they manufacture these narratives. Nobody believes in me. Nobody expects me to win. Everybody's a hater. And they know that that's false. There are tons of fans who love them and are rooting for them. But that narrative motivates them during the game, and they use it during the game to play harder. And then when they win, they just go back to whatever else. It's a useful fiction.
It reminds me of the question somebody asked us a few episodes ago about being a fan of one baseball team and getting a job for another one. Can you have a divided life? And like, there's layers to this, right? So you don't have to, you're not on a team if you're an investor, but you may be on a team in another way, right? You may actually love one crypto project and hope that it succeeds while not investing in it. You can like it and want the best for it while having a low probability that it will succeed. You can love the underdog team, but you're not going to bet money on them in Vegas just because your heart wants them to win. Those are two different things. And I think there's an idea that it's like more noble to do the thing that you like the most, to put all your investment in that. And again, if you have an ability to control or dramatically increase the odds of success, then yes, skin in the game is a good idea. If you're trying to build a company, you want skin in the game. If you're trying to build a product, you want skin in the game. But if it's merely a matter of a team that I like or a project that I have no control over, I can like one thing and invest in a separate thing, and that's actually the right way to think it. To have two different mindsets. Like, which team do you think is going to win the NBA Finals? Yeah. Which team would you like to win the NBA Finals?
Another application of this is in conversations with people who think differently from us. We often get so offended and stressed when someone says something we disagree with, and we feel like, I can't let this moment pass without pointing out the 3 things that are wrong with that statement.
Okay, hold on. I can't let this moment pass without pointing.
Hey, man.
I'm so stupid.
Let's tackle some questions.
But did you want to finish that?
I forgot I was going to say.
Did I kill it?
Yeah, I think you killed it.
I think that's like 5 times in the opening 20 minutes that I've interrupted you.
I think I was going to say...
Lolita, slap me in the face if I interrupt again. You were going to say what?
I think...
That makes 6.
No, there's too much pressure. You know how it is when after like 15 minutes if you try to tell a joke and then everyone's like, okay, man, get your joke over with. Get your joke over with. What is it? And now at this point, no matter how amazing the delivery is, it cannot be funny by the very nature of the context. We'll leave that as we'll put that behind the firewall. If you want to pay an extra $20, you get to hear that story.
We are creating a new category of listener just to hear the rest of that story.
Just that story alone. All right, here is a question from Ashley Boyer at Ashley M. Boyer on Twitter. How do you stick it out at a place where you feel underrated? All right, you challenged me to go first on the questions this time. I could do that for the first half, but then when it gets to the fourth quarter.
Wait, but I don't know the questions. You're going first on the easier ones. You're going to make me go first on the harder ones.
Yes.
Okay, all right, I'll be fine. I'll be the closeout guy. No worries.
You can be. I was going to use a basketball analogy, but I was like, I'm going to lose half.
Did you get uncomfortable?
Yeah, because I'm going to lose everybody.
Are you becoming a slave to our audience?
It was going to be a Russell Westbrook, Paul George analogy, and no one would get that. So yeah, I'm just going to leave it. And then I don't feel good about comparing us to them.
It's too bad. Yeah, I don't really like that either. I don't see that shaking out well.
No. All right, Ashley, how do you stake it out at a place where you feel undervalued? So my first thought on that would be, why stick it out? If you genuinely feel undervalued, why not look for other opportunities? So sometimes you have to exercise the courage to live without the things you need in order to make room for the things that you really want. And if you listen to the voice of fear, the voice that says, oh, I can't live without this job, or I'll never find another one, or no one will ever hire me, that just keeps you from opening the door to bigger and better opportunities. So we can talk about how to stick it out, but I like to question the assumption that sticking it out is something that you should be doing. The second thing I would say is, if you're going to stick it out, then you absolutely have to kill the narrative that you are being undervalued. And there are 2 ways you can kill that narrative. One is you can identify what being properly valued means to me. Clearly, there's some manner in which you want to be appreciated and it's not happening for you. I don't know if it's money. I don't know if it's not being complimented enough. Whatever it may be, you need to identify that and give yourself a chance to create it. I would have a conversation with whoever is responsible for this undervalued experience, and I would bring it up and I would say, hey, here are the things I love about working here, but here's something that I would like to have. Can you let me know what you think I should do to put myself in a position to get there? Or perhaps you can come up with those ideas yourself, but you got to give yourself a chance to get that. And if that's something that you're not willing to do, or if that's something that you get a no on and you still feel like this job is better than your alternatives, then what it really means is not that you are undervalued. What it really means is that you are in the best situation that you could be in based on your priorities. But like all situations, there are some imperfections that you're going to have to learn to live with. And the best way to learn to live with that is by killing the narrative that you are a victim of something other than the choices you are making based on your priorities. That's my hot take.
Yeah, the first thought I had was similar to yours. Like, don't assume that you should stick it out if you really feel that it's damaging. But I also want to say, like, sometimes it's okay to be undervalued. In fact, I would argue most of us are always undervalued in some capacity, right? There's always something that you are capable of that those around you don't fully know the extent to which you're capable of it. And that means you've got some headroom. You've got room to keep growing, to create more. If you're always perfectly peaked, where exactly what you're capable of is exactly what they think you're capable of, and you've got nothing more in the tank, that's not necessarily a good place to be, right? Yeah, you don't have a lot of wiggle room. There's not a lot of room for growth. So it's okay to be undervalued. It's okay to be underestimated sometimes. It's okay for people to think you are capable of less than you are, because that's an opportunity for you to prove something. That's an opportunity for you to showcase something. And so if you can say, okay, I don't need to be properly valued. Like, no one's ever going to fully know how awesome I am in every way. But if I can get what I want out of this job and get the things I need out of here, that's my focus. And, defining that, as you said, is an important key. So if you find that, let's say, people don't think you're capable of a certain thing, and then you demonstrate clearly that you are, there are instances, so that's good if you do it and they agree. Then they're like, whoa, you're even better than I thought. Under promise, over deliver. That's a great place to be. If they are so blinded by whatever bias or idea they have about your abilities that they can't even see, and this is possible, they can't even see the good thing that you did for them, and they still see you as the cute little kid who can't do very much, right? Then it may be time to exit that situation if you feel like you're just not going to get anywhere, because you're always going to be viewed as the low-level person, even when you do high-level stuff. You might need to exit in that situation. And sometimes that happens because your first impression, you didn't quite get it right, or you didn't take enough control over seizing it or setting the parameters. And that first impression can get stuck sometimes, and people will always see you as. That's why there are times where, like, if you come into a certain role as an intern, it may be a lot harder to move up really fast if you never leave the company versus if you leave for a couple years and then come back, and you get a chance to reset your reputation. Because if you're there for 5 years and you started as an intern, in 5 years, if you want to get promoted to somebody's boss who was there when you started, they're going to be like, but you're just the intern, right? So sometimes you have to battle that, and sometimes you have to break out of the rut. But I wouldn't assume automatically that being undervalued is always a bad thing.
Hey, you mentioned it's not always a bad thing. Is there a personal experience where you felt undervalued and you enjoyed it?
Always.
Give me one.
That's my favorite thing in the world. I love to be underestimated is the word that I mostly use, but I think it can be related, because if you're underestimated, then people are going to have an assumption about the value you can create. So to me, that's like the sweet spot, especially if I'm entering any new situation. If I'm entering a new workplace, a new organization, a new social circle, I like to kind of, not like lie or anything, but I like to kind of almost play a little dumb, like keep it a little close to the vest and just be like, oh, this, and this, and not go on to letting you know everything that I know and all the experience I have and everything that I do right away. I'd rather let it be a little mysterious, and I look young and I'm kind of goofy, and I'd almost rather have you assume that I'm just kind of some know-nothing kid for two reasons. One, you get to be a fly on a wall a lot more. You get to learn a lot more. because you hear people talking. If they assume that you don't have an expertise in anything, then they're going to feel more free to say and kind of reveal what they know and whatever. And then 2, I love the delightful moment when you feel the need to, or the opportunity to, jump in and do something that demonstrates some real mastery or value you have. And I love it when people are like, whoa, you really brought it. I didn't know you had that in you, right? Because it's that opportunity for delight. Whereas if you come in with like, I'm the man, blah, 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 then really all you can do is disappoint. And like, I love those fun little moments. And I can tolerate it for a long time. I can tolerate being thought of as less than I think I'm capable of for a long time. In fact, I don't care if people never know. I love being underestimated. Man.